Welcome. My name is Thomas Richards. I'm the CEO of OETC, and I'm an ACPE board member. And I'm really excited to welcome Eric Ogden from the newly named Trefra. And he's here to talk about, is your technology budget unpredictable? Eric is the Director of Field Marketing and Contracts with Trefra. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Eric, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Glad to be here today at this last day of ACPE, and excited to talk with each of you a little bit on the subject of your technology budget being unpredictable. And if you do have any questions along the way, feel free to put those in the chat. As Thomas mentioned earlier, be glad to address any questions that you may have. And I will address who Trefra is at the end of this presentation, but for the most part, we're going to spend time on kind of some of the things that we've learned from a lot of the schools that we work with when it comes to the technology budget and some of the challenges that schools are facing, dealing with, and how they're addressing them. So ultimately, that's where we're going to spend much of our time. And for those of you who are not familiar with who Trefra is, like I said, I will address that at the end of the presentation, just so you know who we are and where we come from. So we were part of a merger at the beginning of the year. And so we'll talk more about that later. But thank you for joining this session. And hopefully we'll be able to share some insight with you today that you'll be able to take home with you and actually utilize, maybe implement some things that could benefit your school or school district. So let's get right into it. I want to talk a little bit about what we've seen over the last year. And this is kind of a really ugly chart for that. But nonetheless, I want to just talk about kind of where we've seen technology go in the classroom. Prior to 2020, we were seeing, this increased growth in technology within the classroom. I mean, it's something that's obviously been happening for many years, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. More and more teachers are utilizing technology to teach their students, and students are utilizing technology to learn. And so that's become kind of the trend, and it has been the trend for years. But what 2020 did in the middle of a pandemic is it kind of brought immediate need to not only technology in the classroom, but the need for remote instruction. And so, not just one classroom or some classrooms or in some states, but everywhere we have school, we had to find a way for remote instruction. And ultimately, by moving to a remote learning environment, what we have found is a lot of schools saw a light shined on the area of the digital divide. We've seen a lot of students that didn't have the connectivity at home, and that created additional challenges for schools. So we're going to talk a little bit about those challenges, and then we're going to get into kind of, how schools are addressing those challenges within their schools. So what are some of the challenges that 2020 has brought about? There's a long list, but I will just touch on a few of those. Number one, once we had this immediate need for remote learning, what we found is a lot of schools did not have enough devices to send home with their students. And of course, that's a challenge when you've got to send students home for their safety and for your staff safety, and yet your students don't have a device to actually do their schoolwork at home. So that created a big challenge for many schools. And then also, most schools didn't have a plan in place for remote instruction. The teachers weren't prepared from a technology perspective, and nor were the students prepared on how they would learn in that environment. And of course, that created many of the challenges that many on the call, I'm sure, have faced over the last 12 to 14 months in trying to address these specific needs. And then once we were able to get to the point where we got a device home to a student, we found that many of the students didn't have the proper connectivity at home. Maybe they didn't have any access at home at all. In fact, one of our partners, Kajit, who many of you are familiar with, recently posted an article where they've outlined over 19 million Americans who do not have broadband connectivity at home. And so that was something that really became prevalent in our understanding of how do we teach students remotely if they don't have connectivity. And so that created a whole nother group of concerns that maybe we weren't even thinking about before. And then to top all of that off, many of the schools were faced with a lack of budget to actually address those needs. And so 2020 certainly created some unique challenges, unlike we've ever experienced in any year prior. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those challenges. Before I do that, obviously, this is something that everyone on the call is familiar with, the various buckets of money that have made their way to the schools, and some of it is still on its way to the schools through both the CARES Act funding, the COVID relief package, and then the American Rescue Plan. All of these bringing much needed funds into the K-12 schools around the country, and ultimately enabling us to be able to tackle those issues that we outlined here in the previous slide. So before we dive into this a little bit further, I want to share some exciting news with everyone on the call. Trefra has announced just a week and a half ago our new campaign called the Trefra Give Back 2021. The only reason why I bring this up, especially this early in the presentation, is we are giving away technology to schools. In fact, I would encourage you, if you're a school that has a classroom in need of devices, I encourage you to be part of this program. Literally just go to connect.trefera.com/giveback2021. And there you can enter, it's a 45-second video or a short essay explaining your need for the technology in the classroom. We're going to give 4 schools 30 Chromebooks with higher ground carrying cases for each. We're going to include with that our iSafe blue light filters for the safety of our students, Chrome education upgrades, securely licensing for classroom management, and ultimately a 3-year platinum warranty from Trefra. All of this included, no cost to the school whatsoever. Literally the only cost is putting together a 45-second video or posting an essay there on the website. You can also look up the hashtag Trefra Give Back 2021, and there's plenty of social posts about that as well. But we encourage you, if there's a need there, or if you know somebody who has a need there, please feel free to share this with them. We'd love to get as many entries as possible. I think right now, last I checked, I think we have about 80 entries, and we're giving away 4 schools these devices. So certainly get those in by May 21st is the deadline for that. And so I encourage you to share it with others. Certainly, if we can help some schools out there, we certainly want to do that. I also want to bring to your attention one other thing. One of our partners, Kajit, is actually doing a digital inclusion grant for schools, also for communities as well, nonprofits. And so if you know of a school that has students in rural areas that are in need of connectivity, certainly I would reach out to Kajit at this link listed on this slide. And they are giving away this type of technology to help students get connected where they may not otherwise have a connection. And those are due, I think, by June 4th is those the entries for that grant. And so encourage you to take advantage of both these offerings. I wanted to bring those up simply because these are free to the participants, and certainly wherever there's a need, certainly we want to meet that need as well. And so just a quick note on both of those programs. So let's talk about the classroom. What does your classroom look like today? Well, maybe this picture represents your classroom. Maybe this is exactly what your classroom looks like today for all of your teachers. Maybe your students are still distance learning. We know that some schools are hybrid today. Some are bringing students back. Some are waiting until the next school year. And so certainly the classroom and the way the classroom looks has changed dramatically over the last 12 months. And so with that, it's created additional challenges, things that maybe we hadn't faced before. So we're sending students home with devices. This has become ultimately the new norm. Many students didn't have devices that they brought home in the past, but now they are. And so with this new norm, the big question is, what could go wrong? Well, we know a lot could go wrong when you're putting devices in students' hands, sending them home for the very first time. There can be all kinds of problems. And so just to kind of represent that in a picture, here happens to be a device that not only was dropped, but this device had fingernail polish remover spilt all over it. And as you can see, there are a number of keys that melted off this device. In fact, it swelled up. It was quite a mess from that accident. But these are the types of things that happen, especially in a home environment where a student has a device, and yet all of the rest of life is going on in that environment. And so it's one of those things that maybe we didn't expect, but maybe should have when we moved to an in-person, a distance learning model where students were learning from home. But these things certainly have happened and continue to happen in our homes. So are any of you having devices broken by students or staff? Those that are taking them home, are any of those devices ending up broken? I'm sure in the comments somebody could probably tell me, yes, I see one. Devices are getting broken as they go home. And thank you for the responses. Certainly this is something to be expected. So I guess with that, I would ask the question, do you know what your annual break rate is? Maybe you haven't been sending devices home with students normally, but do you have an idea of what that break rate is annually? And this is an important question because this really ultimately determines how you address this issue, if you know the break rate. So let's talk about that for a moment. For some of you, this might actually look familiar. This is not uncommon in some tech centers to see a lot of devices that have been cannibalized, so we can make sure that students are utilizing a device that is fully functional. And so sometimes using old devices to repair new devices can keep them up and running and students doing the work that they need to do. So what is your break rate costing you? So if you have an idea of what that break rate is, I'd like to share this next chart with you to kind of give you a sense of what that cost. So from a break rate perspective, now understand that we took an average Chromebook, kind of your base level Chromebook, 4 gig, 32 gig drive, non-touch, and said, what if we hired a third-party company to pick up the device, repair the device, and send it back? What would that cost me, right? And so we took some average cost of what a normal repair would be, along with shipping costs and whatnot associated with that, the parts cost, all of those things. And the reason why we put this chart together is because many schools today, nearly 80% of schools today, have Chromebooks as the device that they're giving to students. And so we centered this around Chromebooks just to kind of give a good picture here. But if indeed you're sending Chromebooks home with students, or maybe you're sending MacBooks home with students, or a Windows laptop, in many cases, these costs may be even substantially higher. But at a 5% break rate, a 10% break rate, 15 or even 25% break rate, you can see here on the chart that the expense is pretty extreme. We've experienced schools that literally, not knowing what they were getting into, had a 43% break rate in year one. So it begs the question, if you had a 43% break rate on your devices in 1 year, what would that do to your technology budget? Would you have much of your technology budget left spending all of the money repairing those devices? Well, I can tell you that certainly for that particular school that had a 43% break rate in 1 year, it really did a lot of hurt on their technology budget. And so we share this chart simply to just kind of shed some light on ultimately the cost associated with repairs. I do want to give a shout out to Ronald Pohl, who did a session on Tuesday who shared some of the issues that he was dealing with and how he addressed those. And thank you, Robert. I'm sorry. Robert, thank you for your shout out to Trefra. He is a customer of ours, and I appreciate the shout out to Trefra during that session, but really shared some insight into what Anacortes School District was dealing with from a damage perspective. But I want to continue on about this repair cost. How are schools handling it? What are schools doing to ultimately deal with damaged devices? I'm going to share a few, but I'd be curious to hear in the chat of any other means by which you've addressed damaged devices within your school district. So how are schools handling damaged devices? For some schools, maybe this is the very first time in the past 12 months that you've sent devices home with your students. If it indeed is the first time, your strategy may have been like many schools, and the first time they started sending devices home with students was, we'll just fix them as we get damaged. Well, as the devices get damaged, that may indeed work out okay, but as we've seen, once that rate goes up, so does that have a profound impact on your budget. And so there isn't really a fixed cost when repairing devices as they get damaged. And not only is there not a fixed cost, but there's also a labor associated with that, whereas your people would have to repair those devices to get them up to speed for your students to be able to utilize those devices once again. And so we've seen that. We've seen schools fix them as they get damaged. And then what we've seen a lot of schools do is actually say, you know what, it's time to get some kind of coverage on these devices so we're not in this predicament for very long. And so we've seen a lot of schools actually go to getting an insurance policy on their devices. And, you know, there's always benefits to getting insurance, no matter what it is that you're covering. But there's always, you know, areas where there may not be coverage. And what we found for a lot of schools that have went and got insurance is they may not have actually had coverage if the device was dropped, but yet it didn't look physically damaged, and yet the hardware was failing. Sometimes it's hard with an insurance policy to get the hardware covered because it's really about the accidental side of things. And so we've seen where insurance maybe falls short in some of those areas, but if you're just looking to get coverage as far as accidental damage, then certainly there are insurance policies out there that can help with that. And I did see here that their students pay fines. Jennifer, thank you for posting that. They pay fines if they damage it. We've seen that where schools will charge a fee. If a device is damaged, they may have to pay for the entire amount of that damage. We've seen a lot of schools charge a technology fee. So before they ever check that device out to the student, they're charging a technology fee so that way they can help augment the costs of any damage that may occur. And that technology fee, we've seen it range widely, anywhere from $10 to $200, depending, of course, on the device. Is, you know, ultimately, depending on what you're covering, that fee is going to be there to help with that cost. And so certainly a maintenance fee or a technology fee to help with that is a big deal. We've seen a lot of schools try all of those, but we've also seen them say, you know what, we're tired. Not every one of these plans has really worked to what we need it to. And so we've seen a lot of schools actually transition to more of a let's get the Cadillac plan with the OEM. Let's get everything covered from hardware to accidental damage, everything. The challenge often with that is that when you go with an OEM warranty, it can be a little spendy. But if you're able to build that into your budget, certainly that is a great option because that warranty can help with you know, any types of potential incidences that may happen down the road. The hardware fails, the the student drops the device or spills something on it, all of that can be covered under a manufacturer warranty. Obviously intentional damage typically is not covered under these warranties. So if you have a problem student that's damaging them on purpose, certainly that would be probably another issue that needs to be addressed. And we'll cover some of those issues on what schools are doing to ultimately address the damage issue. Ultimately we'll cover some of those. But what we're seeing is a lot of schools are actually leaning more towards, is there another option, right? And so we've seen some schools actually take on a third-party warranty where it's a little bit lesser cost, but similar in coverage to that of the manufacturer. However, in either case, we find that often you still need to talk to tech support if there is a damage or if there's hardware that's failed because there is certain hoops that need to be jumped through. And I know that that's a pain point for a lot of tech directors and technicians out there who are having to call in and address those hardware defects or problems with the device. And so we see that this is ways that schools are doing that. And I can see that a lot of schools here, as has been noted here, a maintenance fee, also self-insurance. Some warranties or insurance policies out there will allow for the parents to actually make that purchase beforehand. It doesn't necessarily have to go through the school. And so those are good plans, and a lot of schools have executed those effectively and really helped with the cost that schools are running into. So how can we lessen the amount of devices being broken? And I think that's, there's two questions here, right? Number one, how do you address the cost associated with broken devices, right? How do you address that? And we've talked about some of the warranties and coverage and fees that you can do. We've even seen schools where they'll take on, a tech group. In fact, in my point here, number 6, students do the repairs as part of their education. And so obviously a little difficult in the distance learning environment, but in an in-person model, we've seen a lot of schools actually appoint like a tech team to actually do those repairs in-house. Maybe some of the simpler repairs, replacing screens or keyboards, but ultimately helping with their education, giving them some marketable skills, and at the same token, maybe taking some of that load off of the tech team to get those repairs done. And so we've seen some schools do that. So it doesn't necessarily lessen the number of broken devices, but it can indeed help with some of the labor involved with that. So some of the things that we've seen schools do, and Jennifer, you mentioned this, charging a fee, an annual fee. We've seen some actually charge a fee when it's broken, right? So if they break the device, we've seen some schools do like a $50 for the first offense, $100 for the second offense, third offense, you're paying for a brand new device. We've seen schools do that, and it's kind of a scaled up approach as far as how they charge for that. We've seen a lot of schools put protective cases on those devices. Of course, there's a couple options, right? There's the type of carry-in cases where you carry cases that maybe are padded, so if the student does drop the device, it's protected in case of a drop. And then there are those that are also the always-on type cases. For example, I think Usable, Max Case, Gumdrop, these different case manufacturers out there provide always-on cases so that the student's never taking that case off. We find that those often can help reduce the damage because, of course, that device is protected in case there is any drops of those devices. And so certainly that helps. Jennifer, thank you for the comment there. Sometimes there's a fine associated with that on top of the maintenance fee, depending on the damage. So that makes perfect sense. A student, ran it over in their car. It's not a simple repair. It's probably a total loss at that point. And so could certainly see a fine associated with that as well. So Number 3 on our point here is shame the students into being more careful with the device. Now, this is not necessarily one we recommend, but it is one that we do see some schools implementing, and that is where they put in big, bold letters on the device, loaner. And it's basically a way of, letting everyone know that this student broke their device. Now, granted, some school districts have implemented that. Like I said, we don't recommend it. It is something that some schools have implemented successfully. So that's why we mention it, but certainly not one we recommend. The next point is we do also see some schools offering a partial refund. So maybe they pay a maintenance fee or a tech fee at the beginning of the school year, and then when the school year is over and they turn in their device, so long as everything is in its original working order, then there's a partial refund that goes back to the parents for the use of that, for the bringing back that device ultimately that is back in working order. So let me just read some of the comments here just in case. I want to make sure that we're covering some of these as well. The tech maintenance fee doesn't cover everything. Negligent damage, flying across the room type isn't covered. Agreed. And most accidental damage coverages won't cover that as well, Jennifer. Risk management. Okay. That's maybe one way to deal with that as well. So risk management is the fee, Rob, that you're, or is that a fee that you're associating with that? I see here, Rob, you're mentioning fee was not allowed because the device was not optional. So I see that. Yeah, especially in the distance learning environment, you're going to, students have to have a device, right? So, certainly comes at a cost. How do you mitigate that? Certainly, if everyone's got to have a device, it's kind of hard to mandate that everyone has to pay for a fee. So certainly every school district is different, but certainly I can see that as a challenge for some, for sure. But yeah, I would certainly recommend at least make it an option to parents to make sure that they can cover that in the case of something does get damaged. If they can purchase the warranty or the insurance policy on their own, that, just like we have car insurance or life insurance or homeowners insurance, any of those things, we have those just in case something happens. Certainly it's good to be able to provide the parents with that option. We've seen some schools, in point number 5, that require a mandatory meeting with the principal. Now, granted, this is not something that's been carried out as much in our virtual environment, but certainly still can be. And that is, if there is a damage to the device, some schools are requiring that the student meet with the principal to understand what happened with the device, why the damage took place, and how we can prevent it from happening again. And from what I understand, in this particular instance, if it got beyond to maybe a second or third time, then they would actually pull the parents in or guardians in with that particular conversation with the principal to help better understand why the damage took place and how we can ultimately prevent that from happening again. Let's see here. So it looks like, Nick, you guys waived the cost due to COVID. You guys offer a third-party insurance. Yeah, Worth Avenue Group, very popular way of getting that insurance in place. And Jennifer, thank you for the comment on finding the cost of repair. I can see how a lot of stuff's been waived during COVID. It's just been a unique circumstance that we're all dealing with, and looking forward to getting back to some level of normalcy here in the short term, and hopefully in the new school year as well. But thank you all for sharing those ways you're dealing with it and dealing with the damage there in your schools. So what are some of the other ways we can reduce our spend? So it's not just damaged devices. I mean, that's certainly one area of it, but are there other areas where we can reduce our spend when it comes to all of the technology dollars that are going into the schools today, especially with many of these, we're getting a lot of funnels of money that, at some point will dry up, and we'll get back to kind of a more of a level budget that's more predictable, or at least one that we're going to have to stay within. And so I want to just address some of those things that schools are doing to help ultimately take advantage of some ideas and programs out there that are going to help maybe reduce some of that spend as well. So cooperative purchasing is a great example of how schools are ultimately getting the most bang for their buck, right? OETC, of course, every school in Oregon has that opportunity to utilize OETC, and strongly encourage you to utilize that program. There are other national contracts out there also on the state level, like the NASPO Value Point, and many other national contracts out there. But cooperative purchasing is one way to actually take advantage of some cost savings when it comes to pre-negotiated pricing, whether it's with the manufacturer or reseller. OETC has multiple contracts that you can take advantage of. And so I encourage you, if you aren't taking advantage of OETC contracts, that you should, at the very least, look into them. I certainly recommend OETC, and have worked with OETC over the years, not just within Trefra, but also within other organizations in my past lives. And I've been in the business now for about 30 years. So OETC has been one that I've worked with many times. So definitely encourage you to utilize cooperative purchasing to save yourself some money and ultimately stretch that technology budget a little further. The other thing we see schools doing is bundling. Okay, it's something that we hear in the insurance business, especially car insurance. Many of our car insurance commercials that are broadcast today talk about bundling your homeowner's insurance with your car insurance, with your motorcycle insurance, with your boat insurance. Well, I mentioned that not to talk about bundling all of those types of insurances, but talking about bundling all of the technology needs that you have, maybe into one project where you can get even more from your vendor partner by getting them to sharpen their pencil even more, because you're putting more into the pie, or the piece that you're looking to accomplish, the project that you're looking to accomplish. By bringing more to bear, oftentimes you're going to get the reseller or the manufacturer to ultimately give a little bit more, because the deal's even bigger. Chances are they're going to sharpen their pencil even more to help you get the most out of your technology spend. Thank you, Jennifer Mathis, for the note on the insurance coverage, $50. And we've seen that a lot with the free and reduced lunch students. It's often waived. What we found, honestly, with the technology fee, we've polled several school districts on this, and what we found is about the collection rate is typically around 70%. And more often than not, your free and reduced lunch are the predominant ones, in that 30% getting unpaid. And so waiving that can avoid some of that conflict or that challenge in collecting those fees. And certainly, that would be our recommendation, is if you indeed are charging a fee, that you consider waiving that for your free and reduced lunch, and making that fee ultimately be one that can cover all of your students for damage as well. So certainly would recommend that. All right, so let's continue on. Let's talk about the next thing that I wanted to touch on. It was something that Robert Poole had talked about on Tuesday in his leasing session, and I'm not going to get into details like he did, but I would certainly recommend watching his session with Insight Financial, who was co-presenting with him with regards to leasing. And they get into great detail of how they got into the lease, what they all had covered on that lease and whatnot. I'm just going to hit some high points here when it comes to leasing. But when it comes to leasing, it is really about stretching that technology budget and kind of building that over multiple years, especially if you're getting a device today for your students that you're intending on holding on to. And most schools are going to hold on to those devices for at least 3 to 5 years. And if you're doing that, a lease that marries up to that timeline is very critical, because that'll allow for you to be able to stretch that technology budget out, spread that money over multiple years, and be able to get the technology you need now, instead of having to do that over multiple years, right? Obviously, we've got a lot of students doing schoolwork from home, hybrid models, and in many schools are talking today about ultimately having a distance learning option for students going forward. Now, that may not be true for everyone on the call, but we have seen that with many schools that are actually looking to have that as an option. And so leasing helps to ultimately get the technology you need now and not have to do that over multiple years. So preserve your cash and accommodate your budget constraints. It's going to help you lower your total cost of ownership with an operating type lease structure, so you can do it over multiple years. Life cycle management, it's going to help you hedge against the risks of high costs associated with obsolete IT infrastructure. The key here is being able to set up a lease like a dollar buyout or fair market value lease, where ultimately you can bring that cost down. And we've seen some leases literally that the schools are actually getting at or near 0% interest rate. And so there's some really good deals on the leasing side of things for schools. And so certainly that's something I would encourage you to look into, especially if you've got a lot of technology needs now, but don't necessarily have the budget immediately to do that. Leasing options are certainly something to consider. It allows you the ability, and Robert Pohl hit on this because this is exactly the kind of lease that they did at Anacortes, is they bundled their equipment, their software, their licensing, and everything all into one lease. And you're able to do that with a lease. And so, that's certainly something that we would recommend as well, because then you can really stretch that technology budget. And ultimately, with a lot of leasing companies, there is that flexibility. You can add or delete equipment. I know Anacortes had mentioned that they're in a declining enrollment. Well, if they're in a declining enrollment, there may be a need to actually remove equipment from that lease. But maybe you're in a school district where your enrollment is increasing. Well, many lease options allow for you to add to that lease as well. And so those are things that you really want to explore as far as from a leasing perspective. And ultimately that lease, in many cases, especially for schools, because leasing companies understand, those that work with schools understand how things fluctuate and change over time. And so being able to restructure that lease is also an option with many leasing companies. And so something seriously to consider if you're looking to stretch that technology and really get the most out of your technology spend. So that's it kind of in a nutshell, kind of the things that we've seen. I'm going to take just a couple minutes and tell you who Trefra is, and then we'll open it up for questions beyond anything that you put in the chat. But I'll, like I said, I'm going to just touch on this very briefly. I'll go through it very quickly because I don't want to pitch you all. I really want to just share with you what we know and go from there. But you may not be familiar with Trefra, so ultimately, I want to answer the question: who is Trefra? Who is Trefra? Well, that's a really good question. Who is Trefra? Well, as of January 1st this year, Trefra merged two companies, Trinity 3 Technology and Firefly Computers. Some of those of you who are on this webinar today or this session today are familiar with one of these companies. You may be familiar with both. Both of us actually have a shared history going way back, probably about 8 years. And so today we are one company. We joined forces as of January 1st. I personally came from the Trinity 3 side of the business and actually worked with some of the folks at Firefly many years ago. And so, like I said, we do have a shared history. And so bringing the two companies together has been an incredible marriage of two really strong companies in the K-12 education marketplace. And I will tell you, and I was sharing this with Thomas prior to the beginning of the session, Trinity 3 and Firefly came together. And what you found often with mergers is it typically comes with layoffs. Well, I can tell you that we had 0 layoffs when we brought the two companies together. In fact, we've hired over 50 employees since our merger on January 1st. And so we have been very busy and growing rapidly in providing technology to schools. In fact, this year and even last year, we've provided over 1 million devices to K-12 education schools and school districts. So who are we? We are an American-based company. We're based in St. Paul, Minnesota. In fact, both Firefly and Trinity 3 are based in St. Paul. So bringing us both together, we were both neighbors already. So it made it very easy. When you call us, you're going to get somebody live on the phone. We know what we're doing. We've been in this business a long time. Our average tenure of our frontline team is over 10 years of industry experience. As I mentioned earlier, I've been in the business for over 30 years. But many of our people have got a similar tenure to myself as well. We strive for long-lasting relationships. It's really about relationships for us. We're not interested in getting to the quick sale and moving on. We're really about developing relationships and helping you get the most out of the technology that you are putting in students' hands and in your teachers' hands as well. We can handle the preparing of devices really of any size, from 10 to 50,000. We can prepare the devices that you need for your school district. We can do that. You don't ever have to talk to tech support unless you want to. When it comes to repairs and needs, it's simply an online submittal or an email, and we'll get you the repair parts or the repairs you need without ever having to talk to a tech. We don't require it. Now, granted, if you want to talk to a tech, we're glad to put them on the phone with you, but we don't require it. So that's one of our differentiators. And the thing that differentiates us the most is we lead the industry with the best warranties. Our VP of Sales Operations, Jim Matson, put it this way: Trefra warranties are designed for maximum instructional uptime. We want to make sure that your students have the devices they need throughout the school year. And so how do we do that? And I'm not going to dive into this too much. In fact, I'm just going to touch a little bit on our platinum warranty, which is most common. All of our customers that purchase our warranties, 90% of them go with our platinum warranty, which includes unlimited accidents per device, covers theft loss, covers 0 deductible. We pay shipping both ways, and we cover a stylus if you lose that or it gets damaged and stops working. We're going to cover that. And we cover Chromebooks and various laptops as well under that warranty. And we actually cover your battery for beyond 90 days or a year. In fact, some devices, we cover that up to 3 years on your battery. And so we have the most extensive warranties in the business. We don't third party it out to anybody else. Trefra is solely responsible for the warranties. And so we take care of you. And when we say we're concerned about relationships, you know, when it comes to warranties, because we're doing the warranty repair ourselves, that means either we're going to take really good care of you or we're not. And we're going to either stand or fall on our warranties. And so ultimately, we take that upon ourselves to give you the best warranty and services in the business. And we take full responsibility for that. And that's where we ultimately will develop our relationship with you. Once you start utilizing our warranties, you'll see the difference in Trefra. And so we encourage you to take a closer look at our warranties. And you can see that there on our website at trefra.com. So maybe you've already bought your devices somewhere else and you're wondering, I only got the 1-year warranty, the manufacturer warranty with my device. Can I get a warranty from Trefra? You absolutely can. We warranty existing devices. Even if you've had them for a couple of years, we can still warranty your existing devices. So I would encourage you to reach out to our Oregon rep, Matt, and he can assist you with that in identifying which warranty you would need and how long you would need that covered. So we are on cooperative purchasing contracts as well. I mentioned OETC. We represent New Line on that contract, and we're ultimately looking to add additional manufacturers and hoping that in the near future we will be on as a reseller as well. So certainly those are things that we're looking forward to, and we are always have our eyes open for new bids with OETC, so we can expand our offering there on the OETC contract. We do have other contracts as well, national contracts around the country that we can offer as well. If indeed you're finding you're not able to find what you need on the OETC contract, certainly let us know, and we can certainly direct you elsewhere. But certainly the first place we would recommend you all go is to the OETC contract, because there is such great contracts there and such good coverage on so many different products in the technology space. So I encourage you to utilize that. Last but not least, I wanted to touch on a new program that Trefra is offering to schools. We just launched this the beginning of this month. And what's exciting about this is a library of STEM lesson plans that we have put together. We've put together an incredible team of top-notch educators who have helped us create some of the best STEM lessons you'll ever find. And these STEM lessons are curated by Milken Award winners, people that are highly recognized in the education marketplace. And these lesson plans cover all the grade bands. They're UDL aligned. They meet all of the ISTE standards. In fact, one of our contributors is an ISTE board member. These are designed, all of these lessons are designed for in-person or virtual. And the best part of this is they're free to every school that purchases their devices from us. So if you're getting your devices from Trefra, you now have access to a full library of STEM lessons that really tie into the technology you're using in the classroom today. And so we wanted to announce that here on this call. So if you're getting your devices or you're considering a vendor for your devices, this is an added bonus that we provide to all of our customers that are getting their devices from us today. And so I wanted to make a quick note on that. So that's all I have for you today. I want to say thank you to everybody for jumping in on this session and hanging around. Are there any additional questions that I can answer for anybody on the call? All right.
Eric, I don't know if you're seeing it there, but you're getting a lot of claps and thank yous.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. I guess the way I have it set up, I'm probably not seeing it, but thank you. I appreciate it. I see them now. I had to expand my screen, but do appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for jumping on the session. It was a joy speaking with all of you, and thank you all for sharing. Jennifer and Rob, I think we had a couple different Jennifers chiming in there. Thank you so much. Appreciate your input, Nick, as well. Thank you all for your input, and really appreciate the opportunity and time. Thank you. And Thomas, thank you so much for being a great host and get me queued up perfectly. So
absolutely, I appreciate that totally. We did not coordinate that very gracious plug of OETC there, but I certainly appreciate it. And so we're going to end the session. Everyone, we do really quickly here. Let me remind everyone that at the end of the session block here, we have a little break, but then we have our closing keynote starting at 1:30 with Christopher Emden, and then at 2:30 we'll have our closing and giveaways. So I encourage everyone to make it over there. Thanks again to Eric, and thanks again to Trefra for being a part of this event and giving us this session. Everyone have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.